Hi, I'm Josh Tyson, co-author of Age of Invisible Machines, the first best-selling book about conversational AI. Age of Invisible Machines explores the learnings of industry veteran and OneReach.ai CEO Robb Wilson. Each week, Robb and I bring in a guest to continue the conversations we started in the pages of our book. This week on the Invisible Machines podcast, we're talking about the virtue of AI systems that are designed to collaborate with people rather than compete with them, how federated learning opens doors for securely training LLMs on private data, and why focusing on use cases rooted in accessibility will move AI forward for everyone. Our guest is Tom Gruber, co-founder of Siri and Chief AI Strategy Officer at Sherpa.ai. Tom has been working with language-based AI models for nearly 50 years, and we talk about the enduring relevance of his early work designing a computer system that enabled nonverbal people with severe physical disabilities to communicate using natural language. Along with co-founding Siri, Tom launched the Advanced Development Group at Apple, designing and prototyping new capabilities for the digital assistant. At Sherpa.ai, Tom is using federated machine learning to augment human potential while protecting privacy. If you like this episode and want to learn more about the early days of Siri, you might check out our conversation with another co-founder, Adam Chayer. That was the first episode back in season 2 of the podcast. Right now, though, let's jump into this fascinating conversation with Tom Gruber. Invisible Machines is produced in partnership with OneReach.ai. Their Generative Studio X platform for orchestrating AI agents has been named a leader by every major analyst group, including Forrester, Gartner, and IDC. Enterprises and organizations all over the world are using GSX to create fleets of advanced AI agents called Intelligent Digital Workers, or IDWs. These IDWs leverage tons of shareable skills and are highly customizable using the platform's no-code building tools. To try out an IDW and experience AI agents with real agency, head to OneReach.ai. Well, Tom, great to see you, and thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah. It's great to be here.
Robb, a pleasure as always seeing you again.
Yes, as always.
As always. Tom, So Robb and I were just talking, and Siri is really interesting to us because, based on our understanding, some of the more advanced capabilities that that you guys have been working on prior to being acquired by Apple were actually shelved by Apple when they did that rollout in 2010. We were wondering if maybe you could talk about some of those capabilities and maybe some of the thinking at Apple in terms of like why they wanted to hold off on certain features.
Well, sure. Like the app, we were designing for a world which had never seen a mainstream consumer, voice-directed interaction with an AI. So we knew that one of the biggest problems was discovery. Like, how does the user discover what it can do? And that, so I worked really hard on that. We built a multimodal input system to help with that. So that is, you could do speech, but you could also do tapping. And the reason we did that is we could build a model of a language model, a predictive language model, what the things that it understood are, like all the possible things, the ways of saying things that it could understand. We had a language model of that. And then as you tapped, you could basically fill out utterance. You could say, find me restaurants near my office in Cupertino that serve French food and are open on Saturday with reservations for 2. And you can that whole complicated utterance, you could literally like tap it through and it would autocomplete using personalized, like Cupertino, not just random city name or something like that, because it knew where you were or where you'd been. And so that feature, when we first launched it as an app, now not as Apple, it was used a lot. And we were looking at the logs. It's amazing. People were using that as much as the speech almost. And so that one, and I think we succeeded at our goal of trying to keep people in the guardrails, so to speak. Like because again, they didn't know what to say. Of course, they immediately go off and say, has sex with me on the couch, and what's the, what's the, and all that. Like they always, those questions were basically anticipated by kind of just kind of a magician's, intuition about what people might say. But that feature, Apple decided not to go with that feature. I can't tell you what their thinking was per se, but now that I'm not at Apple, it's not their style. They wanted to go big, with the wow of what is new about it, right? So they went voice all the way in, voice out too. We didn't do voice out in the app for a reason, but then they said, no, we want voice in and out, and we want it just that way. And so, and interesting enough, if you think about that, they've done that before when FaceTime came up. When I saw the demo of FaceTime on the phone, it made me tear up. It was like, wow, these guys are changing. I mean, we all knew about Skype, but now in everybody's hands, you could really talk to your loved one around the world, with your face and everything. And they went video first. They could have gone audio first, but they understood the emotional impact of going with a full-on video call, even over cellular. It was just amazing.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Like the idea was to go big, and I know there were other parts of Siri, right? That like how it could interact with components and like micro UIs or it's sort of interaction with the screen itself, where it was multimodal in a sort of threaded sort of way. Like I understood the context of the screen and what you were doing on that screen, as well as that. And context, I think, is like probably the big thing, right? For as you were saying.
I don't think the Siri app per se didn't have any much more context than the Siri eventually, other than it remembered what you told it in a way that the early Siri didn't at Apple. But basically, that context requires basically being a platform to do that right, like to really have all the sensors and everything. So it didn't do that well. But that you're right about it being important. It was, the fact is that what it did do differently that most of the other apps still are kind of struggling with is the operationalization of the, you're referring to like kind of the things they can do.
Right.
So like, that was Adam Chayer's real masterpiece there. Like I was sort of focused on the user experience, and Adam was focused on the engineering of how it could do things. And the doing, it was an orchestration of like 100 APIs in the back end.
Right.
And see that, so if we have an interface to AI today, it's an interface to a large language model that remembers stuff it's read in various ways, right? But it normally doesn't have an access to the APIs on your phone. You really wouldn't want it today. Today's version, it might go off the rails a little bit and do something. But that's the tricky part. One of the tricky parts of getting personalized AI right is you need to somehow hand over the keys to some of the things that you have in front of you that do things on your behalf in the physical world, spend money, send messages on your behalf, do these kinds of things that have importance, that can't be taken back. And that's something that the Siri vision was all about, like really getting things done that would fill the expectation that if you had an assistant, what would your assistant do for you?
Yeah, Adam and I had a bit of a different view as to orchestration, in the sense that I perceive that our future is where machines will talk in natural language to each other. And be in the conversation and be able to observe and see what's going on, and that the speed is less critical.
You're going to bet both of those already, Rob. That's already true. In the multi-agent architectures today, you might have a front end that then that delegates tasks to the sub-agents in a modern multi-agent architecture.
Exactly.
And those are prompts. Those are language prompts usually. So it is talking to each other. I mean, it depends on what they're sharing. If they're sharing data, structured data, it'd be a silly thing to encode it in English and then back into data again when you could just share the data.
Right.
So I think you get a bit of both, actually.
Yeah. It's like everything. It's not going to be one thing. It's going to be a combination of things. It's just that interesting. The universal, the sort of universal language is, how we. notebooks. I don't know how much Jupyter notebooks are in your world, but I'm
Sure. Yeah.
a fan of them. And I think I kind of see that as the architecture in general for how machines will talk to each other, because it really is that woven, code and language fused together into one, sort of one communication metric versus like APIs, which are like data object over here, documentation way over here. I sort of believe in the notebook approach where you need one document that has both.
Yeah.
So sort of interested to see how that notebook approach kind of creates a whole new language for how machines will talk to each other. And I think that's sort of a fascinating
Yeah,
area.
we actually, interestingly enough, I did a project in that when I was at Stanford doing research at Stanford. We were trying to figure out how would you capture human knowledge that's machine readable about big human things that people do collaboratively, like build airplanes. So those to capture the rationale and the decision making that goes into those things is hard, because they have like just kind of designer notes or something, but that doesn't really make it reusable by everyone else who needs to learn from it and maintain it. And so we worked on a scheme which turned out to be like a notebook, which essentially the designer would show why the behavior is the way it is, why the device operates the way it does, and then speak over that and say, well, this is why I did it this way or that way. So for the part that's better shown than told, you'd use a simulation. And for the parts that are better told, is a human annotation. I think you can see that now with machines might be able to even say to each other, this is I'll say that you have competing AIs working on some kind of scientific discovery problem. Well, they might actually show the lab results of the theoretical experiment, the simulation that they ran, to the other machine, who could then take the reins of the simulator and try a variant of it.
Yeah. Yep. You just said something that triggered a question for me, or area of discussion I wanted to hear from you on, which is in this idea that it can be more than one voice. They can argue, they can compete, there can be three answers to a question. And that kind of leads us down a long road of like anthropomorphic nature of these systems that we apply to them that are great for bridging that gap. As you said, these are new systems to people, so we anthropomorphize them so that we understand them. It's sort of a skeuomorphic, concept of familiarity, but then it so limits us because then we think of it as a question-answer pair versus a question-3-answer pair, or an argument, and so we sort of see the interfaces as being very human-like, as if a human's on the other side when a human's not, and therefore they can conjure up applications on the fly, they can conjure up code and run it, they can conjure up multiple answers to a question that compete, they could argue and let you monitor that, and it's a whole different UI paradigm, but you have to break out of that anthropomorphic component, that thought that you're talking to another person versus you're talking to many machines or an ecosystem of machines, really. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I just wanted to hear how you feel about it.
Well, I think you're right that the future in the near future of using modern AI is going to be in a kind of, you have a team working for you, not an individual. And maybe the very first generation of this, you're the manager of the team. So you need to get really good at knowing how to delegate. Agent 1 is good at this, Agent 2 is good at that, and so on, and monitoring, and then making sense of the results of all these. So you might say, in fact, this is a common technique with brainstorming with AI today. You could say, okay, you take the role of this, you take the role of that. Pretend you're this person, you're that person.
Right.
Now, what would they say about this subject? And then you can literally have brainstorming sessions with these agents. And so it'll be really interesting to see how we evolve, or we as humans become good at this kind of delegation to machines, where we've done this over and over. We've learned how to be like our own personal PR agents. So like, your 14-year-old girl is like the best PR agent in the world for herself on Instagram. So that would be, we're going to need to grow the skill, which is normally a professional skill, of administration, of managing a large team. And most people aren't that good at it. But the interesting thing is one of the key skills there is actually having a critical but open mind about what they're saying, knowing that they just, going off the rails and just making stuff up, but not being judgmental. It's like, that's just the nature of these beasts, But and then also that you told them, you sort of steered them, you go extreme on this point of view, take us to what that would mean.
Right.
If someone was making that point. And then you get the benefit of human brainstorming sessions where you have diversity. The results are really clear. The more diverse the group that's doing brainstorming, the better ideation that comes out of it.
Yeah. I sort of had this vignette moment. I thought of, there used to be an app called Hot or Not, and you would just swipe left or swipe right, and it was the beginning of the swiping craze as a UX modality or pattern. And I just imagine, like, at some point our day is just swiping yes or no to a bunch of questions being asked by AI. It's like, yeah, should I? No, not yet. More ink for the printer? Not right now. Yes, buy it. And like you said, we become delegation, machines, just still human in the loop. We're still making decisions. We're still chasing something. This kind of takes me to a kind of a deeper point, and it kind of gets into more of the human brain side of it. And that's like, I think a lot of people, believe that dopamine is a reward drug, for the achievement of something. But they don't understand it's a chase drug. It's a drug that rewards you for the pursuit of something, and that actually the end of that pursuit is not the reward. That's where dopamine stops. And so you can kind of boil up life into like the constant, consistent pursuit of something that delivers like fairly consistent level of dopamine in our brains, which is probably a balance of dopamine and pain, right? It's not all dopamine all day. And if it's chasing that really engages us, we think of AI as completing tasks for us, doing the chasing for us so that we can get to the result faster. But if the chase itself is what life is all about and that's what fuels us, then maybe we're looking at AI's role wrong, that it more should enable us to chase our goals that are more fulfilling for us, like create those chases. It's almost like gamifying our lives so that we're more engaged, because if it does all of the chasing for us and all we end up with is results, are we just going to be depressed? I don't know if this is anything that you've thought about, but it hit me when I realized that the chase is the reward, not the result, and that we're so focused on productivity, and getting, having AI complete something for us or achieve something for us and do that chasing. Like, look, I don't have to chase anymore. Going, well, then what is the point of my existence? And so AI has different roles, right?
But dopamine is really an addiction drug, hormone, and as you're right, it has to do with the behavior you're doing as you're pursuing the goal, for sure. But also remember that it's any activity that can be reinforced, even intermittently, can produce dopamine addiction. And so, we know social media, we've now addicted a couple billion people with dopamine and anger. It's the limbic system being kicked in to addict people, to heighten their arousal, and then hit the dopamine when they get somewhere. But then also, look, the chase itself includes pleasurable activities that AI enables. So I'll give you an example. I just recently, or this year, last 6 months, really went down the rabbit hole of image generation. I do public speaking for a living. I always use stock imagery or hire a designer. And this time I wanted to really get to the bottom of what's this for. And I spent enormous amounts of time iterating, right? And I was having a blast. Like, I was iterating on I was solving visual metaphor problems that normally I would only solve in a collaboration with a good designer, And also, but I incorporated the AI, and also the stock images are actually really good seed ideas for conversations with generative systems. But it was really cool because I could say, no, it's so much fun. It's addictive. It's dopamine inducing to like, oh, I want it like that, but I just want it a little bit different. I want this. And because you have, but I could never do that as, I can't draw for beings, right? I mean, even my major art is photography and videography. I capture it when I see it. Well, I can't generate it, right? But now I could generate it. And so I think we're going to see a lot of those ways of using AI. If you're a writer, and almost all of the first wave of creative augmentation that AI has been doing, people say it's the blank page problem that's helping them. It's getting them past that. I have a blank page. What am I going to write? What am I going to draw?
Right. Yeah.
And then it's off to the races with it. With sort of a testing loop. Like, oh, I'd like it this way. And so I know there'll be some things that would be better done as just get it done. Like I'd rather have it just fix the bug in the code and tell me what it did.
Right. Or buy the ink for my printer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it all feels slightly precarious, right? Because in the paradigm where I guess it may be more productivity, but where you're just like swiping left and right, like, yes, do this, don't do that. With each swipe, ostensibly, the system needs your input a little bit less, right? Because it'll start building more awareness of like what it should be doing. And so then, yeah, it's like, how do we keep that allyship intact where the machine is there to augment our abilities and not the machine is like kind of like placating us so we feel like we're important. But I think your example, Tom, is strong because that ability to like kind of supercharge your creative abilities is intoxicating and like very useful. So maybe that's the direction to head.
I think we see even in the seeds of the early Siri metaphor, the Siri paradigm, as a virtual assistant, right? That would be, we designed against that backstory. Like, it's a virtual assistant. What would a human virtual assistant do if they had all the access to all this information and all? And you can see how people, when they get personal assistants, they go through a phase of training where they calibrate first what the assistant can do, and then they slowly, progressively reveal more about their lives and delegate more things to the assistant over time. I think we'll have to learn that skill as well, and our AIs are going to have to figure out how to do that journey with us. Right, like I said, almost all AIs are not personal today. They're almost all anonymous. They're not predictable. They're different every time you try them, but that's not because they're unique. And personal, this is because they're just stochastic. But the key thing here is that we're going to have personal AI when it comes. We're going to have to learn how to use it powerfully, because if you use you can hire a virtual assistant now, a human virtual assistant. They're actually quite good, and they're augmenting themselves with AI now. But you can't just say, well, here's the key to my financial services account. It's just not gonna. You'd never go there, right? But you might start trusting. Okay, here's my Dropbox. Blah, blah, more and more. You might have more and more trust as you work with the people more. And I think we'll see that with AI, because remember the movie Her? I mean, the opening scene. When he first gets Samantha, he goes, well, let me see your email. So he gives her email. It's like 5 seconds. Okay, I handle it. That'll be like an interesting milestone when we're at that point.
Right.
Yeah. And like creating, Samantha's interesting because Samantha has like so much contextual information at its disposal, right? So, and that's like a key piece, right, to creating these personalized experiences, which like jams right into, data privacy and security. Is this where something like federated learning can be of use, do you think?
A really good insight. Yeah. Federated learning allows like a global model to be created by combining the data from a lot of smaller data sets without sharing the data, without literally transmitting the data at all. And so it is used for things like language models on Android, where like you want a text-based language prediction model, like for texting, but you don't want to have it's none of your business what they're saying in their texts, right? So you don't want to aggregate all that data. So in that kind of model, federated learning is really good for. And I'm working with the firm right now, working on other ways of doing it. You can use all kinds of sophisticated ways of using federated learning at scale too, not just like little phone things, but where the nodes are like giant hospital systems that can't share the data with each other, or big financial service firms. So there's a lot of really great things where you can have the benefit of training a global model without having to aggregate the data. We'll see how that works in the personal AI world. We haven't seen what anyone's come up with. the PI that came out of Anthropic is no longer going to be run as a PI, as a personal assistant. And Apple and Google haven't come out with really their version yet. We'll see. And both of those companies could do a fully personalized one, and they have a choice. Is there just one generic model that's dumped onto the local device, and then sort of added, the new context is added as context for some kind of lightweight fine tuning, or is the actual personalization so important to the core use that they need to build a generalized, personalized model? Like,
Right.
how do all of us want to interact, with the navigation system in an intelligent way, or whatever the use case is?
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of brings up, like, an analogy would be cars, self-driving cars. Self-driving cars are interesting. Self-driving cars that are part of a swarm that can talk to each other are way more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And if you localize it and you say, your awareness is limited to the car, then you kind of lose out on the fact that it's all my devices that, have that context and understanding. And as devices proliferate, they all have the benefit of that, versus every device I go to is different in terms of a degree of knowing me, which is like essentially I need to remember the interface of every single one, know what it knows and what it doesn't know, so that I can command it correctly. Which you brought up earlier, which is discovery. Is there a solution? Did you guys come up with a solution for discovery?
Well, I think we did it for the time, for the technology and the user experience of the time. And we used humors, to like make it so when you cross over outside the bounds, it gently and humorously tries to bring you back.
Yeah.
We used the dialogue metaphor to do a lot of that kind of thing. But it still took a while for people to know. It would have been nice if we had like a good kind of discovery problem, is when essentially, as a human being, you stare at the screen like you were referring to. What if you could just look at any app on the screen and have the thing make sense of it and talk about it? People are talking about that way of using AI, and it may happen. It depends on whether the platform companies want to let random apps have access to arbitrary. It's a giant security hole, so you have to figure out how to solve that. But yeah, you could imagine that. So yeah. Anyway, I think the device coordination thing is slightly different issue. Here we have the potential to have a bunch of devices talk to each other, but only if they have a common like ontology of the world. There's no way. You have there's a sensor on the stop sign, and then there's a car. Unless they have some agreement about what the data mean, they can chat all day long. It doesn't make any difference, right? But if they agree that this is what velocity and distance are, and this is, so the guy can say, by the way, the sign that's 5 miles ahead of me has got a ton of cars that are, right in front of it, and everyone understands what right in front of means, then they can effectively coordinate their activities.
I was just going to say, is part of that language basically what you're working on, which is like a privacy, like without the privacy component.
It would have to be that in that particular case, it could be private. It could be done publicly or privately, because it's an observation of the real world. That's like a map data or something like that. But it's still the issue there is ontology agreement, like essentially agreement on meaning in the community, whatever language they use. So in theory, you're talking about for this metaphor. Oh, maybe we could actually have English be the language between machines.
Right.
But the problem with English, of course, is it is very ambiguous.
Yeah,
and precise. And so why would you really want your devices to be like guessing what they mean when they talk to you? Maybe. It depends on what they're doing. If they're doing safety, no. If they're doing maybe, writing books together or making movies or that, well, yeah, sure. Maybe that'll be a good use of ambiguity.
Yeah, maybe some hyper literal form of English that is like, that humans can see and read and decipher what's going on, but it would be very bland, I suppose. Maybe that's
anything,
the key.
Even a structured data, you could have you just have to make a UI on it. You can make any kind of data come alive to humans if everyone knows what it means, right? So in fact, the right way may be if you're talking about distance and time, the better way of communicating with humans might be a visualization instead of the words. You're 15 meters away. And so I'm not worried about the human inspection of the data stream itself, even if it's structured, as long as the engineers who build it know what it means and all the programs agree to that agreement. I mean, there was huge examples of mistakes where, someone tried to build like the Hubble Space Telescope, and it turns out that one of the subcontractors thought it was inches instead of meters or something, and it screwed the whole thing up.
That's right. Yeah. Imperial. Yeah. Yeah. The little things. Communication. Yep. That's true. That's like a shared ontology, just like you said. If they don't, if the stop sign is in meters and the car is in imperial measurement, in trouble. It's a really good point. There has to be like a standards of sorts that everybody agrees to, and that in itself adds overhead and creates like a structure that somebody has to manage and keep track of, like you said, an ontology that somebody has to own.
And ontologies are tricky. I mean, you've worked with ontologies a lot, Tom, and the more information you're trying to, is ontologize a word? Yeah, the harder it becomes.
Well, for ontology engineer, yeah. No, that stuff widely became part of the mainstream. It really, you see them all over the place. It's not like a librarian that manages a giant, index. It's more like these agreements about what, units and measures and data structures and all that. Those things happen routinely and you don't hear about them. They're in data schemas. But there also are ontologies at the level of like, we know that this is a patient record. And in it, there are these codes that you get used for, for prescriptions and for prior authorizations and for payment of medical procedures. Those codes are standardized by the government and by the FDA probably. And that's their job. That's what their job. They're an agency, and they're supposed to be doing that stuff. No one complains about the standardization. It's a good thing that someone works and maintains that. It makes everyone else's life easier. Whereas, but if you have, the standard thing with industry is, as usual, someone wants to own it, and it's a monopoly. Company tries to get a monopoly in it, then they play their games. Standard wars. You don't have to go all the way down that way. But with AI, it's going to be interesting. Let me pivot a second to a slightly other thing you said, Rob, because I thought you triggered a thought about this visual of all these agents or kind of coordinating together. I think that one of the biggest frontiers we have with AI that hasn't been crossed yet is collective intelligence. Right now, we're kind of focusing on the AI as the super smart one person, right? But if you look at what's happening in our species at this century, we're really smart individually, and we're collectively stupid. When we get in large groups, we make really bad mistakes. We elect really bad people to run our countries. We allow the crazy things like assault weapons in schools or whatever. All these crazy things that are collectively dumb moves. And yet it's not just because it's inherent in the way we evolved to do what we're doing right here. We're really good at, for instance, figuring out whether we're lying to each other, we can trust each other, figuring out like evolving ideas and improving the truthfulness and the usefulness of the conversation. But when we get in these large, especially anonymized populations, we don't. So to bring back to the AI thing, AI could have a role in actually fostering collective intelligence by augmenting what is normally our limitation, right? We could basically, in fact, unfortunately, it's being used the exact opposite way right now with mass, democratized, weaponized propaganda, social media and other things, right? The ability for people to just sow chaos and misinformation. But the same kind of idea could be used to augment people so that the truth-seeking part of society can band together and have their AIs help us create meaningful, useful consensus about things that we need to make decisions about. And improve.
Next phase of Wikipedia,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like a sidecar to a motorcycle, not the other way around, We're still driving because we want to chase things. Like you said, you're creating something artistic. You're trying to make a decision. You're trying to achieve something in your life. They're in that sidecar helping us move more quickly, which, to your point, faster dopamine results, right? Because wow, like this is fast, this is fun. It's, speed. We like speed. We like motion, right? And so if it can help us move faster through some of our tasks, that's fun. And
and the sidecar might something like this. Collectively, you might say, hey, let's get a bunch of us together and let's ride in formation at high speed, like a drone fleet, right? Let's just go, and we could never do that individually.
Right.
But we could say, hey, sidecar, get a dozen other sidecars together. Let's do a fleet and let's swarm and let's do something cool with that.
Yeah.
And that would be that would be a new chase, a new journey.
Yeah, it's interesting because it feels like maybe our collective intelligence was a little higher, even like 50 years ago when there were three channels that people watched. So there was some sort of consensus about what was happening in the world. And there were, I'm sure, limitations to that too. That does present kind of a limited view of the world, especially if it's kind of like manned by a patriarchal society. But now we've got social media that was sort of promised to kind of bring us closer together and let us share more information. And it's kind of done the opposite. It's sort of like obliterating this notion of collective intelligence because we can all live in these little echo chambers. So it'll be interesting to see if there's a way that AI can help bridge us to a new, hopefully better way of relating to, I guess, reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we're seeing the first efforts in this area are heading directly on how do you make sense of information. And there's a couple of companies I'm working with in that space. Really fun. It's almost a nonprofit passion because people are so concerned about the solution of consensus sense making. For instance, if you wanted to make sense of the scientific literature today, there's tens of thousands of papers written a day. You couldn't possibly read them all. And even in your field, you're only going to read a tiny subset. And yet, the technology of LLMs and ways you can harness them with RAG and some other texts, you could actually have it read all the papers. And then you can actually have a conversation about the literature, right? And then even and really truly, surf that edge of knowledge the way like the Renaissance man used to do, and he could have read everything in the world. So I think that's a good example of truth-seeking technology to augment our collective intelligence in the sense of so for instance, if we wanted to work together on a big problem, one of the examples is CRISPR, for example. It's kind of it already happened, so it's a non-example in real life. But the CRISPR invention was what required an inference that spanned specialties. So there's people working in bacteria, there are 2 or 3 different specialties, and someone saw the connections between those 3 different silos of science and came up with this amazing engineering technique for genetically engineering things. And so there's tons of those waiting to be discovered, but our normal way of organizing ourselves into disciplines and sciences don't put them on a platter for us. So AIs are going to be able to don't have that limitation. They can read all the literature. And so now we have a chance to overcome that horizon. Yeah.
Yeah, to your point, you can create that swarm that goes out and reads it all, and then they can synthesize it down to a stream for us that's based on our context and relevance, and tell us what we should know or it thinks we should know, and stay up to date without having to read it all ourselves. It's a fun world, but it's still showing that it's serving, because behind us knowing is a quest that we're on, right? Otherwise, why do we need to know? Right?
No, absolutely
it's
true.
this
How does it
idea
know
of
what you want to know?
AI, like I think there's a concept that the AI is going to become our nanny, and we're just going to become these vegetables that just wander around being told what to do, and when the opposite is true, where it's just going to fuel our quests. Most of our quests anyway are ridiculous. What's the point of running a marathon, really?
Yeah. Well, that would be
I-
lovely if we could do more marathon type quests and a lot fewer of these sort of, competitive things that hurt each other. I think it's possible that the AI can free up some of our work to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the concept called humanistic AI, and I introduced this in 2017 on TED Stage, and it's gotten a little bit of play, but you see it in different forms right now. The basic idea is that when you build the AI, you can choose between making it where the humans are the center of it, like it's for the benefit of and to augment and collaborate with the human, or you can make AI as the goal is to make machine intelligence, that is to optimize a thing that requires intelligence and to make and sell it. And so it shows up subtly in different points in the culture. Like, for example, if we celebrate that AI just beat the world Go champion, we're actually endorsing the machine-centric view.
Right.
If we celebrate the fact that a doctor just diagnosed a disease for the first time or invented a drug or something with AI, even though the AI was involved in drug discovery, it was driven by a human need by humans and supervised by humans to get to the right place. And that's humanistic AI.
I can say from my experience, I've never explored a field that had more, more unobvious answers. So every time you choose the obvious answer, it's usually the wrong answer. I don't know if you've experienced that in this, but
that's why prototyping is a big useful enterprise. I mean, when I stayed at Apple after Siri was launched, I didn't run the operations of Siri. I ran the research or the advanced development. And so that was a really fun job. And what we mainly did was we de-risked the engineering of future features. And we do that by basically building them out, fleshing them out as much as possible, in a prototype or a design situation. And that is a very valuable piece of modern engineering that people forget. Oftentimes it's just done as we'll throw it to the engineer and he'll do a spike in the first sprint and figure something out. But actually, no, this is what, the more of that you do, the better you get in the long-term result. It's kind of like measure 3 times, cut once. And I think that's what we'll see now with the AI. It's just try to be topical about it. But I mean, you can actually brainstorm, prototype hypothetical things now.
Right.
Because the generative AI can make instances of what you're imagining, which was never really feasible before.
Yeah, it's like simulations you can run, getting more and more real. And therefore
like you
more
can
and
make
more
the
useful.
movie trailer before you make the movie, which is how movie makers make it, right? They spend a lot. So you can make the movie trailer for your experience that you're trying to create with generative AI today, and then test it with people and see, well, what could go wrong with this? What are the interesting gotchas? Why is it not the right answer on the first try?
Yeah.
You were you just brought up Apple, and they've kind of always been ahead of the curve when it comes to designing for accessibility. But it looks like you did some work early on around designing systems that would allow people with physical disabilities to speak or to communicate using natural language.
Really?
As we were kind of digging into that yesterday, Rob and I realized that he had done some similar work in that area. I can remember working with Toby on an article once, and they had some eye tracking things that they developed that were helping people with ALS communicate with the world. Do you feel like there's enough movement in the direction of accessibility with these new kind of generative tools and some of the AI things that are emerging? Because it feels like that's
huge.
Such a huge
you're
area.
Something really fun. I mean, it's actually true. In 1983, in my first graduate school AI project, was in fact to build an augmented communication system. I call it a communication assistant to help people who had disabilities that couldn't speak. And it would be using, some kind of input switch, like it could be a straw or a switch, or it could even be an eye tracker. But the hard problem is language prediction. So my thesis was about how would I use a language model, an AI language model, to predict so that we could speed up the rate of communication given a fixed bandwidth, switch input. And so it was successful. We built it on Apple IIe because you could actually ship that on a battery-powered computer on a wheelchair. And so it was fun. It was 1983. Now, what's interesting now, I'm on the board of an advisor to a company called Cognition, or there's X where the T should be. And Cognition is doing this for real with modern technology for scale and with people with ALS and cerebral palsy and people like that. And this time the technology has gotten a little more interesting. You can go beyond switches, where you can have an EEG on the back of your head, an electroencephalogram that's listening to your brain waves. And so instead of just clicking when this cursor is going by a thing, you can actually understand the intent of what they're focusing on in their visual field. So like a Tobii eye tracker might say, well, my eyeball is kind of dwelling over there in that part of the screen. So that means I'm clicking on that thing, or that's kind of a slow way of getting entirely way of. But you can use your mind, you can just sort of say, oh, I'm thinking about that. And it works. And so they're combining that with modern language models, which are a lot more sophisticated than the one I squeezed on an Apple IIe. And you can really say, well, and the thing can listen and go have a two-way conversation and know the counterparty's context, right? And now understand what would be appropriate things to say in this context, given all the personal history I've had before. So we're really excited. We're building that thing. It's real. And we're going to have, there's millions of people who need this. ALS is really a really important use case because in the end stage of ALS, you can't even use an eye tracker. So it's a predictable, horrible situation, but their minds are completely still intact. So you're like almost locked in. But cerebral palsy, stroke victims, there's about 1 million of them a year that have this. A lot of people lose the ability to speak, and AI is really an important technology in bringing and augmenting them so that doesn't have to be, this horrible lock-in experience.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever read The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. I've been reading that one again. And
that's a great, it's a great book.
Yeah, just to go through letter by letter and blink. That just proves that the desire to tell stories and to communicate is so important and so intrinsic. And probably working on that book probably kept that guy alive for another couple of years. So
Stephen Hawking wrote entire books about physics.
Yeah.
Which just
yeah.
So we're excited about that. There's all kinds of potential there, and accessibility is a giant area for AI right now. But it's a special case of human augmentation, and that's the whole humanistic idea. You want to make that technology be like the glasses you're wearing that makes your vision better, but it doesn't replace your eyeballs. Right?
It's simple concept when you just put it like that. I somehow just went to those new Apple goggles where they have eyeballs that are screens that make it look like this creepy,
oh yeah,
they're not your eyeballs, but they're to make other people, be able to see where your eyes are. It's just super creepy, but we're not going to walk around with those.
Oh yeah, that'll be a great application. By the way, I'm sure there's already companies out there going to build apps for the Vision Pro that can essentially narrate for the blind, right? It'd be very cool. And I think that's gonna it's gonna change a lot of lives. Simple things like do I want to is there an open seat in the theater where I'm about to sit down? You can tap your way in with a cane or something, or a dog's not going to tell you that. So you have to have something more augmentative that's personal to help you be more graceful in that situation where you just you can walk without anything special. You're blind people walk really well in public spaces, but little things like that, or there's noticing that there's two people in front of you, and most blind people can actually hear the presence of the people, but nonetheless, there's always social situations where having a little augmented vision can really bring them more into the social milieu, right? And I think that should be our goal of technology, is to make life more dignified and meaningful.
For sure. Well, those are great use cases too, because not only are you able to help people that can immediately benefit from some of this technology the most, but an app that can help a blind person navigate a space, the technology that would perfect that experience could be used in so many other ways. That's like an integral piece of creating the self-driving car ecosystem we were talking about, where things are recognizing other things. So it seems like such worthwhile work to dive into.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you design for an extreme case like that, you end up making it easier for everyone else, right? So language model techniques, that I used in 1983, I could reuse them when I did design for Siri's autocompleter. A lot of the same ideas were in there.
Yeah, the connection was a lost on me. Yeah. Yeah. So before we end, I want to nerd out for a second here, ask you a question around context and privacy, and this puzzle piece of, can we provide AI with enough context to make wise decisions with us or on our behalf without providing it with the data that if hacked, it like makes us vulnerable, right? This privacy versus usefulness of having that context. Is that achievable? And then also from the standpoint of achievability, in that we know that, sometimes you can sort of triangulate privacy, right? It's not that it's an overt a state, we know what state you're living in or what city you're in, but based on things you might have said, like your favorite sports team, we can infer that kind of stuff. So I wanted to kind of hit you up on both of those. Can we create context A that's anonymous but still useful, and then B, is at some point, is it not anonymous?
Like you said before, there's ways with federated learning, for example, that you can build really strong models with lots of data that aren't revealing personal data. So that's an important principle. And there's really, I think in the future, there'll be no excuse to not do it in a privacy protected way. Since we know technically we can do it, we shouldn't just do it the cheap, easy way just because we can.
Right.
Where we like the social media companies just pool everything into one giant machine and then optimize a business goal against the population. So if you think about how personal AI is going to happen, if we really get a personal assistant that's truly context aware of your life, there's going to have to be a very, very tight privacy boundary around the data. And technically today, iPhones are supercomputers, and they're as powerful as most laptops, and so the same thing with the Android phones, but they don't have that much memory. So that'd be a way of dealing with that. But, they have enough to store in structured form, for instance, every email that you've ever sent and every text you've ever sent and your calendars forever and things like that. So there's a fair amount that you can keep on the device, right? But you can't just throw like ChatGPT at it, because its way of making sense of context is either like you feed it the entire context in the prompt,
right,
or you fine tune on it, which you can't do. You can't find those models on little devices. But you can also see other ways. I mean, technically, there's plenty of ways of solving this. You could have secure enclaves in the cloud that do this for you. But the key thing is the contract between society and the platforms has to be made. I don't mind blaming the social media tech companies. They can take it. They have plenty of money and plenty of technology. They could do better. But they didn't. Their contract was not very nice. Their contract is, we're going to give you this free platform to share everything, and give you stuff you want. And then the consequence was adverse for society.
Yeah.
And I think we have a chance now with personalized AI to do the contract with our eyes open before it happens, right? And say, hey, it might be regulatory, it might be industry commitment. I mean, like the folks at Anthropic, Reid Hoffman and Mustafa Suleyman, and who've now gone out to Microsoft, and now Shaun White. These folks have character, integrity, backbone, morals. You can trust them if they say it's going to be a certain way. And I think if we can have leadership like that in industry, you can even have industry establish a contract with society, that we can see and then everyone will copy it if it's successful.
Well, cool. Well, thanks for joining us. This was great. It was an awesome conversation. Fun. I enjoyed it. I hope you did.
It's really fascinating.
I did too. Thanks very much. Yeah. This has been fun. And the time flew. It was really easy. It was a really great conversation.
Awesome.
Definitely. Thanks, Tom. All right. Well, thanks again for joining this ongoing conversation about conversational AI. Be sure to subscribe to Invisible Machines wherever you get your podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review on the Apple Podcast app. You can also watch these conversations on the Invisible Machines YouTube channel. This podcast is produced for UX Magazine in partnership with OneReach.ai. Over the past 5 years, our team of nearly 200 engineers, scientists, experienced designers, anthropologists, and linguists have been developing Generative Studio X, an award-winning platform that has the lone distinction of being named a leader by every major analyst group. GSX is a complete environment for hosting, creating, analyzing, and scaling your own digital teammates called Intelligent Digital Workers. For an interactive demo of IDWs in action and to learn more about the GSX platform, head to OneReach.ai. This podcast would not be possible without the hard work and dedication of executive producer Elias Parker and producer Kate Timchenko. Our video and audio editor is Michael Litvinov, and we rely on support from the marketing team at OneReach.ai, including Allison Harshberger, Anastasia Nechtalio, and Vera Prokodko. Thanks again, and we look forward to connecting with you next week, right here on Invisible Machines.